Caitlin Clark's brilliance has never been in question, not by her teammates, not even by her rivals. But her rise has come with a price. Online rage bait, distorted narratives, and politically charged criticism have transformed admiration into ammunition. The same league that celebrates her talent has also become a stage for misinformation and division. And in the middle of it all, Lexie Hull stands at a crossroads, a restricted free agent whose future hangs in the balance as the league itself teeters under CBA disputes, gambling allegations, and an undercurrent of distrust. For many players, this isn't just about contracts or minutes on the court. It's about navigating a professional world that feels increasingly unpredictable and politicized.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
What's happening in Indiana is a microcosm of something much larger, a league struggling to balance authenticity with survival. Clark's targeting, Hull's contract limbo, and the rumors of locker room strain all stem from the same fragile ecosystem of politics, economics, and public perception. The game has become more than competition. It's become a mirror reflecting the fractures within the sports foundation. And while Clark continues to shoulder the weight of expectation, players like Hull remind us that sometimes the loudest truths are hidden behind silence. Lexie Hull breaks her silence, kind of, and in doing so, she might have revealed more than 1,000 words ever could. Because when a player speaks up just enough, but stops short of addressing the real elephant in the room, what they don't say ends up being louder than what they do. That's exactly what's happening right now inside the Indiana Fever and really across the entire WNBA. At the center of this storm is Caitlin Clark. She's been praised as a once-in-a-generation talent, breaking college records and bringing unprecedented attention to women's basketball. But since stepping into the WNBA spotlight, it hasn't just been cameras and applause. It's also been backlash, twisted narratives, and relentless rage bait trying to turn her into a lightning rod for controversy. But the truth? Inside the league, most players respect her, even her rivals. Her skills aren't up for debate. They see the passes, the shots, the IQ. It's undeniable. What is up for debate, though, is everything orbiting around her. Because the outside world has decided Clark isn't just a basketball player. She's a cultural flashpoint, and that's where things start unraveling. Right around the Fever's playoff run, Clark's sister Kayla shows up in all-black Air Force Ones. They get dubbed a good luck charm, a little superstition to lighten the pressure. And for a minute, it worked. The team felt a spark. Fans got excited. It gave people something to latch onto that wasn't controversy. But then they lost. The playoffs slipped away. And those sneakers? Just another symbol that couldn't hold up under the weight of everything else going wrong. Because while fans were joking about shoe magic inside that locker room, tensions were growing. And from the outside looking in, it's hard to ignore the silence. Especially from Lexie Hull. She's not subtweeting. She's not leaking drama. But she's also not rushing to defend her team's chemistry. Instead, she keeps things light, commenting on Clark's sneaker game, reaffirming her own commitment to Indiana, but sidesteps every hint of deeper conflict. That silence has meaning. Hull isn't just another teammate. She's a restricted free agent, which means her future in Indiana, or anywhere, isn't guaranteed. And right now, that's a major point of stress. The entire league is staring down the barrel of unstable contracts, CBA negotiations that could collapse, and even rumors of a lockout. This isn't just about switching teams or sitting out a few games. This is about livelihoods. Lexie Hull's silence? It's survival. Because every player knows, speak out, and you could be framed as disloyal. Stay quiet, and maybe you ride the wave. Maybe you get picked up again. Maybe you don't get caught in the churn of a league that's teetering on the edge. And the external chaos? It's not letting up. Alongside all the internal friction and player contract anxiety, the league is facing something much darker. Allegations of systemic targeting against Caitlin Clark. We're not just talking about media smear campaigns or social media hate threads. We're talking about serious claims, civil rights violations, politically charged efforts to suppress her influence, even alleged game manipulation for betting profits. Yes, gambling is now part of the story. The NBA's own officials are being scrutinized for their ties to possible gambling schemes. And with that kind of scandal bleeding into WNBA territory, it's no longer conspiracy theory territory. It's a credibility crisis. If even one game outcome is influenced by betting interests, then every foul call, every missed travel, every substitution becomes suspect. And when Clark is the one driving headlines, pulling in massive viewership, and being positioned as a league saver, she also becomes a potential target. Because a narrative that big is valuable for advertisers, for gamblers, for anyone trying to control the league storyline. And the easiest way to twist that storyline is to muddy it. That's where the politically charged support comes in. Groups like the MOA have openly aligned themselves with Clark, and it's only made things more divisive. She didn't ask for that alignment, but now she has to carry it. And in a league that already struggles with political perception and social messaging, that kind of support can feel more like a trap than a boost. Players like Lexie are stuck in the middle of it. She's close to the drama, but not close enough to escape scrutiny. She has to navigate a dynamic where every teammate is dealing with their own interpretation of what Clark's presence means for their role, their playing time, their place in the system. And again, this isn't about talent. No one's arguing Clark doesn't deserve her spot. The issue is how her spotlight is being weaponized, how her stardom is creating tension in a locker room that should be focused on building chemistry, not dodging narrative landmines. It's not just the media either. Fans are fueling it too. Manufactured rivalries like Clark versus Paige Buchers are being pumped out like content machines. Stats get skewed, context gets ignored, and the actual game gets lost in a haze of outrage and tribalism. These debates aren't rooted in basketball. They're about clicks. And they feed into the same toxic environment that makes it impossible for players to speak openly. That toxicity seeps into everything. It shapes how players interact with each other. It forces them to second-guess their interviews. It pushes them to be cautious, especially when so much of their future is wrapped up in perception. Lexie Hull's decision to stay silent on locker room tensions? That's not a lack of leadership. It's a strategy. And it's one more sign that this league, right now, is dealing with far more than just what happens between tip-off and the final buzzer. This is bigger than basketball. It's about labor instability. It's about political interference. It's about misinformation poisoning the well. And it's about players, young, insanely talented players, being forced to carry the emotional and professional burden of a league that can't seem to get out of its own way. Hull's appreciation for Clark's style might seem like a throwaway line, but in context, it's not. It's a neutral gesture, a way to say, I'm not against you, without risking being seen as taking a side in something much, much bigger. And if that sounds like walking on a tightrope, it is. Because that's the reality of being a professional athlete in this kind of environment. You're expected to perform at your best while navigating some of the worst parts of online culture, internal politics, and media chaos. And if you slip, the fallout is swift and public. So where does this leave the fever? Where does it leave Clark, or Hull, or the league itself? Unstable. That's the word that keeps coming back. No one's denying the talent. No one's questioning the passion. But the infrastructure, the leadership, the long-term vision, all of that feels like it's under threat. Whether it's from bad faith media, mismanaged contracts, or systemic dysfunction, the WNBA is in a fragile place. And until those deeper issues are addressed, silence might be the only safe response left for players like Lexie Hull. But silence doesn't fix anything. So if you care about the future of this league, really care, don't get distracted by the noise. Look at the bigger picture. Demand better leadership. Push for transparency. Support the players who are trying to survive the chaos while still showing up and giving their all. And while you're here, drop your thoughts in the comments. Is the league handling the situation the right way? Should more players speak out? Or is silence, right now, the smartest move? Like the video if you're tired of the fake drama overshadowing real stories. Share it with someone who thinks it's just locker room issues. And hit subscribe, because as long as the chaos keeps coming, we'll keep covering it. The story is no longer about whether the Fever can build chemistry or whether Caitlin Clark can handle the physicality of the league. That would almost be too easy. The real narrative, the one barely being talked about in public but whispered constantly behind the scenes, is how much pressure, instability, and unspoken tension is gripping this league from the inside out. And Lexie Hull? She's sitting in the eye of that storm. Here's the thing. Most players don't walk into their restricted free agency, while the league, they play for teeters on the edge of a lockout. Most players aren't trying to secure their future while watching coaching drama, gambling allegations, and political interference spiral out of control. And most players aren't teammates with the single most polarizing rookie the WNBA has ever seen. But Lexie Hull is, and whether she likes it or not, she's part of this firestorm. Her public silence on locker room tension, pointed. Her light, almost throwaway comment about Clark's sneaker game, strategic. In a league where almost nothing is accidental, especially when cameras and reporters are around, every word matters. Every silence matters more. Because right now, it's not safe to speak freely. That's not an exaggeration. When misinformation dominates, discourse and rage bait is the algorithm's favorite meal, one sentence, one tone, can be repackaged into a million different narratives. So Hull opts for a kind of diplomatic invisibility. Show up, support the team, compliment the star, and avoid giving the media anything to work with. It's not about being fake. It's about protecting what little control she has left. Because even if you don't say anything controversial, the headlines will make it controversial. This is the same environment where player reactions get turned into think pieces, where bench expressions spark theories, and where a team's chemistry is judged by 5-second clips out of context. And meanwhile, players like Clark are being made into vessels for every social, political, and economic anxiety that's been simmering in women's sports for years. Let's call it what it is. Caitlin Clark has become a battleground. Not by choice, not by behavior, just by existing at the intersection of talent, popularity, whiteness, marketability, and timing. Add politically charged endorsements and coverage that alternates between worship and weaponization, and you've got a player who can't win, no matter how many games she wins. It's not just internet trolls. It's not even just rival fans. We're talking about structural targeting here. Allegations of league bias, civil rights violations, and narratives being actively distorted to diminish her impact. That's what the Wall Street Journal's coverage suggests, and it's not a stretch to believe it. Especially not when you factor in how uncomfortable the league has looked trying to balance its support of Clark while also pacifying internal critics. And now, as gambling scandals creep into WNBA discourse, the stakes rise even more. Because if these NBA-adjacent allegations of betting influence and match-fixing bleed into the W, every missed call becomes suspicious. Every officiating decision involving Clark starts to look rigged, either for her or against her, depending on who's telling the story. And in a league already fighting for legitimacy, that perception alone can do irreparable damage. That's the context players like Lexie Hull are navigating. This isn't just about how many points they score. It's about how well they walk the tightrope. Because inside that locker room, dynamics have shifted. Players have to decide whether they're aligned with a new franchise face, or whether they're at risk of being edged out by a system recalibrating itself around a singular star. And the catch? Even if you do support Clark, saying so too loudly can backfire. You might be accused of playing politics. You might look like you're trying to ride the coattails. The entire situation is a no-win trap, and the only way out is to say as little as possible. That's why Hull's silence on the drama speaks volumes. It says, I'm here, I'm watching, and I'm not about to get dragged into a mess that's bigger than me. And it's not just her. All across the WNBA, players are feeling the strain. The CBA is still being negotiated, with a very real threat of a lockout hanging over everything. Coaching instability is hitting teams left and right. Salaries aren't increasing fast enough to keep pace with the media expectations. And now there's the added burden of handling storylines they didn't write. Clark may be the focal point, but everyone else is collateral. You can't look at this and pretend it's normal. The Indiana Fever are trying to build a team in the middle of a cultural war. And that pressure doesn't just affect how they play. It affects if they get to play. Because if the league goes into lockout, if teams start slashing contracts or losing sponsors over scandal. The players who suffer won't be the faces of the league. It'll be the Lexie Hulls, solid, reliable, smart, but not media magnets. That's what's really on the line here. This isn't about locker room beef. It's about structural instability that affects every player's future. And the more the league tries to pretend it's just noise, the more obvious it becomes that something is broken behind the scenes. So while some fans dissect Lexie Hull's body language or look for secret tension in practice clips, the reality is much more serious. She's not avoiding drama. She's trying to preserve her career in a system that's giving her fewer and fewer ways to do that. And what happens next? That depends on whether the WNBA chooses to address the bigger picture or keep chasing clout and controversy. Because if they keep letting external narratives dictate internal policy, if they keep sacrificing nuance for clicks, if they keep letting players like Clark carry the burden of the entire league's identity, then the whole thing starts to crack. And when it does, it won't be the Caitlin Clarks or the high-profile rookies who fall through first. It'll be the Lexie Hulls, the players who've given their time, their talent, and their silence in service of a league that may not be able to protect them in return. So if you're watching this thinking it's just another sports soap opera, think again. This is about structural tension, political entanglement, and a league that's at a turning point. And now that Lexie Hull has spoken, even just a little, it's time to pay attention. Not to what's being said, but to what's being held back. Because that silence, it's not emptiness. It's calculation. It's resistance. And it's one more sign that the players know exactly how fragile this moment really is. No matter where you stand on the Caitlin Clark debate, this whole situation has officially outgrown basketball. We got civil rights allegations, locker room tension, media manipulation, and now gambling scandals. This isn't a storyline. It's a full-blown institutional reckoning. And right in the middle of it, Lexie Hull. Quiet, composed, controlled. Her refusal to comment on locker room dynamics isn't just her staying out of it. It's a mirror reflecting just how dysfunctional the entire system has become. Because when a locker room becomes a metaphor for the league itself, fractured, unstable, suspicious, it makes perfect sense that players like Hull are choosing silence over honesty. In this environment, speaking up isn't brave. It's dangerous, especially when everything surrounding Caitlin Clark has been weaponized. There's no nuance left. You're either supporting her or jealous. You're either defending her or hating. There's no room for context. No room for middle ground. That's how social media operates now. Binary outrage cycles where every detail becomes proof of some grand conspiracy. And for WNBA players, it's exhausting. It's performative. And it's utterly unsustainable. Clark is the most watched player in the league right now, but she's also the most misunderstood. Her talent? Undeniable. Her impact? Massive. But the public perception of her has been so warped by rage bait, click-chasing pundits, and politically fueled support groups that the real story, the human story, has been buried. And let's not act like the league hasn't played into that. They know exactly what Clark represents. She's a cash machine. She's marketable. She draws numbers. But in their rush to capitalize on her star power, they failed to protect her from the very chaos they helped create. And it's not just her that suffers for it. It's everyone around her. Teammates like Lexie Hull are expected to smile, nod, and go along with a media frenzy that's completely redefined their team. They're supposed to play nice, show unity, and pretend like there's no friction, even when everything they've worked for feels like it's being reshuffled around one player. And no one's saying Clark asked for that. She didn't. But that doesn't change the fact that the atmosphere has shifted. Now factor in restricted free agency. Hull's career is literally hanging in the balance, while the entire league's financial future sits in limbo. The CBA negotiations could implode. A lockout could happen. Roster instability is everywhere. And while the public focuses on locker room drama, the real drama is that no one knows who's going to be employed next season. In any other profession, these conditions would be unacceptable. But for WNBA players, it's just another week. It's easy to get caught up in the surface-level headlines, who said what, who liked which tweet, who rolled their eyes during a timeout, but those things are distractions. The real crisis is structural. It's political. It's financial. And no amount of team bonding exercises or social media PR campaigns can paper over the reality that this league is struggling to protect its players from the forces now pulling it apart. And what happens when you throw gambling into the mix? Let's not gloss over that. The fact that NBA officials are now being tied to potential gambling schemes is terrifying. Not just because it's corrupt, but because it opens the door to the idea that player treatment, game outcomes, and public narratives can be manipulated for profit. If someone is profiting off Clark being targeted or protected, how do we trust what we're watching? And if players suspect that's happening, how do they focus on playing? This is where the trust starts to crumble. And once that goes, it doesn't come back easy. Hull's silence, when placed against that backdrop, stops being passive and starts being political. It's a move, a calculated one. She's preserving her voice for when it actually matters, for when the chaos dies down and there's room for real conversations again. Because right now, the noise is too loud, the stakes are too high, and every quote is a trap. So what are players supposed to do? Pretend the team's fine when it's clearly under pressure? Speak up and risk backlash from fans and execs? Push back against the narrative and watch themselves get benched or labeled difficult? This is the impossible environment they're being asked to navigate, and it's breaking people down piece by piece. But here's the twist. Despite all of it, players like Lexie Hull keep showing up. They keep playing, keep competing, keep trying to represent something bigger than the noise. And that persistence, that quiet resilience, isn't just admirable. It's defiant. Because while the media spins and the league postures and the scandals swirl, the players are still doing the work. They're still protecting each other, even in silence. They're still fighting for stability, for recognition, for fairness. And if the WNBA doesn't start listening, really listening, then they're going to lose more than just games. They're going to lose trust. So if you're tired of the distractions, if you care about the people behind the headlines, and if you want to see this league survive all the noise, speak up. Drop a comment below. Is the silence smart, or is it costing the team more in the long run? Should players be saying more or protecting themselves? And how much blame lies with the league for letting things get this messy? Hit like if you've had enough of the narratives. Share this if you want the real story out there. And subscribe for more coverage, because this storm isn't passing anytime soon, and we're going to be here through every twist and turn.